actually as two population groups. One, the combatants who serve in reserve duty. It was distributed to a lot of people, but what we cared about is the reservists and combat soldiers and combat support soldiers in the ground forces, because this is where we identify the main gap and the general population. And a lot of people responded. We received over 1,045 combatants answered. 1,045 combatants and combat support soldiers answered. So we have this survey that we believe truly represents the atmosphere among those who serve and the general population. I do not intend to give you the full snapshot of this survey. It was also published at the Yediot Ahronot newspaper today. You can look at it. Just I'd like to bring up a few interesting points and talk about how what we consider to be the source of the problem, why we call it a crisis, and what are our proposals on how to try and solve. Perhaps the word solve is too big a word, but how to try and smooth things out a bit. So first of all, I'd like to show you who are the people who serve in reserve duty. So we can see here the data. You can read it regarding the segmentation, and I have to say that my assessment before this survey regarding the demographic breakdown of combatants was different than the actual picture, even though we need to understand that this is merely a snapshot, but it doesn't show us trends. But anybody who comes to a combat serving unit sees a lot of people with kippot. When you visit a service, reserve forces unit, see that many of them live in the periphery. And this is why I was surprised to see these results. What we see is that the breakdown with respect to political view, perhaps we initially thought that it is mainly people from the right wing who do reserve duty, but actually the overall population in Israel, those who participate, out of the 1.5% who do reserve duty mentioned by Ofir, and these are figures that we know. Excuse me? Sorry, can't hear comments from the audience not spoken into a microphone. I apologize. Yes, this is what you can see here. The survey appears. You're welcome to read it thoroughly. We'll also post it on the Institute's website. So anyhow, you can see who the reservists are. We ask, are you secular, traditional, or Masorti, or religious? And here you can see the breakdown. Now, regarding... Let's see.
שאלנו דברים שמציקים לאנשי המילואים, איך הם רואים למשל את נושא התגמול שהם מקבלים. אתם יכולים לראות את הנתונים כאן, שלגבי אנשי המילואים, כשהם מסתכלים על התגמול שהם מקבלים, אז הם מאוד מאוד לא מרוצים, אתם רואים שמי שמשרתים, חלק מהם אנשים מבוססים, שכבת הביניים קוראים להם כאן, אבל יש גם פחות משכבת הביניים שמשרתים, ולמעשה המילואים, התגמול שהם מקבלים הוא מאוד נמוך. מי שיודע את המספרים שהם, אני לא מדבר על מפקדים שהם קצת יותר ברמת הכנסה יותר גבוהה, אבל משרתים שהם עדיין אין להם מקצוע, עדיין בלימודים, מקבלים מספרים, אני חושב שהמספרים, אני לא יודע, אולי מי שמשרת פה יודע, זה 200 ומשהו שקלים ליום מילואים, מספרים מאוד מאוד קשים להסתדר איתם. אז זה לגבי הנושא של תגמול המילואים. לגבי שביעות רצון, בגופים שונים, אנחנו שאלנו לגבי השימוש במילואים בחירום, כמו שאתם רואים, אנחנו רואים שחלק גדול מהמילואים מרוצה
those who serve in reserve duty are pleased, and we know that for the military in recent years, and Ofir already mentioned this, what the reservists feel, or what the military, or what the message conveyed by the military, not in its own words, because they speak, big game, and anyhow, in recent years, they didn't really use the reservist, and we saw, and the member of Knesset Eisenkot mentioned this. I think that operational training and activities, when a unit is summoned to act, because why do they come? There's this sentence by Yonatan Geffen, I hate my country, but I love my company in the military. So they come for their friends, and if there is no cohesion, but if they don't see each other, how will this cohesion be formed? If a soldier sees his commander after he finished his military service only after 3 years, there won't be any reason for him to feel committed. And we think that operational activities, that's very important. Training and exercises. I'm not only looking at the green part, which is positive, I also look at the orange part, which is the negative part of the answer, and we can see how the reservists perceive regarding their personal equipment. That means their personal combat equipment. It's not their actual personal equipment, but combat equipment. You can see the results on your own. No need to elaborate. This was a topic of great concern, and member of Knesset Eisenkot also talked about it, the gap between how the reservist, or the person who serves in the military, how they view themselves, how they see how others view them, and we see a great gap between how the reservists think that the general population perceives them. 66% think that society considers them to be suckers. It doesn't mean that they consider themselves to be suckers, but in the overall population survey, it's only 12% who think that, and all the others actually feel the exact opposite about them. So it's quite an amazing gap here, this mirror image, and we think that we need to devote some thought to this. Why is this happening? Mainly, I believe it's because of the messages we hear in the media, how people speak about how they perceive society, and how the jobs, how the workplaces treat them, and the family, and the university, and we see what an impact these things have.
עכשיו הניתוח שלנו שאני עשינו פה, אני יושב ויובל בזק שהוא ינחה את הפאנל הקודם, יחד איתו כתבנו מאמר מאוד עמוק על העניין הזה, ואחד הניתוחים שלנו הם מה גרם לתופעה, למה אנחנו קוראים לזה משבר. ופה אני רוצה ללכת ולתאר איזה מין מעגל קסמים שאנחנו נמצאים בו, וציינו את זה כאן בפאנל. במלחמת לבנון הראשונה, המילואימניקים שוחררו אחרי המלחמה מרצועת הביטחון, והסיבות שנאמר כאן יוצאים ומדברים. ולמעשה, בתהליך הדרגתי, לאט לאט, במקביל כמובן לעניין של ירידה בהיקף המילואים, והסיפור הכלכלי, כי זה עבר, ההוצאה למילואים עברה מהמדינה לצבא, למערכת הביטחון, ולכן הוא צמצם באופן חד את ימי המילואים, אבל צמצמו באופן חד מאוד את נושא התעסוקה וביטחון השוטף. ולעצם המילואים פחות ופחות השתתפו במאמץ של התעסוקה וביטחון השוטף. התוצאה מזה עלה מאוד הנטל על הסדיר, ולמעשה אם אנחנו מסתכלים ב-20 השנה האחרונות, הסדיר כמעט ולא התאמן, אלא עסק בעיקר, עשה את האימון הבסיסי, ועסק בעיקר בביטחון שוטף. עכשיו, העלייה בנטל הזה יש לה מחירים, שהסדיר עוסק בעיקר בביטחון השוטף. קודם כל, שהסדירים מגיעים למילואים, הם לא מאומנים. אנחנו גדלנו בשגרה של מי שעשה את המחזורים של 3-3, היה אימון קיץ ואימון חורף. אימון קו אימון קו, זה היה חצי זמן
to
תעסוקה
have
וחצי זמן
a
אימונים.
lot of operational
צה"ל שינה את זה
activities and
בהמשך
training,
לארבעה
and
חודשים,
then
ארבעה
the
חודשים,
IDF changed that to 4 months.
וזה
Before that,
השתבש
it
לגמרי
was 3 months,
ב-20 שנה
and that
האחרונות,
has
פרט לחלון קטן, היה פה
become
שוב
completely
פעם.
disrupted in recent years,
חבר
especially
הכנסת
for,
איזנקוט כשהוא היה
except
רמטכ"ל,
for one window
הוא החזיר את זה
when
חזרה
member of
ל-17-17,
Knesset
כאילו
Eisenkot was chief of general staff,
לארבעה
he
חודשים, ארבעה
took it
חודשים,
back to
ואז
4
עדיין
months,
זה
4 months,
השתבש,
and then
ונאמר
it
כאן
was
כי
again disrupted, and we just
הרצון לא
heard
להפעיל את
that
המילואים,
the
כדי לא
desire
לשלם את העלות
not
של המילואים,
to
כמובן,
use reserve
גרם לזה להפעלת
soldiers
הסדיר
in order
בצורה
not
ומתח את
to
הסדיר
pay
מאוד.
for their
אז זה
days.
צריך להבין
This
שזה
really
תופעה
stretched the capabilities of the
שהשפיעה מאוד גם על
mandatory soldiers.
העניין
So
של
this had a great impact both
המתיחה של הסדיר כמובן, וגם על העניין של מי מגיע
how
בסוף
much you
למילואים,
stretch the
כשהם
capabilities of mandatory
בכשירות
soldiers
מאוד מאוד
and the level of training and
נמוכה.
preparedness of the reserve forces
אז זה
who
שחיקת
hardly
הכשירות
trained.
הסדיר. התוצאה מזה, זה
The
למעשה
result of that
צמצום
was
גם
a
אימוני המילואים,
reduction
ירידה
in
בכשירות
the number of reserve days, a drop in the
והלכידות של יחידות.
preparedness,
אמרתי
and like I said,
לא נמצאים יחד, לא
when
תעסוקה
people are
מבצעית ולא
not
עושים לא
together,
אימונים,
when
אז
you
זה
don't
לכידות
train
אתה מצפה
together,
מהיחידה
when you
הזאת.
don't do operational activities
ולמעשה
together, there
מתרחב
is no
הפער בין
reason to
סדיר
have
למילואים
cohesion,
בעיקר
and this
בגלל
increases the gap
שהסדיר
between the mandatory
קולט
soldiers and the
בשנים האלה
reservists, especially because
קלט
the
המון
mandatory
טכנולוגיה,
service
והמון,
soldiers
מישהו אמר המון המון
took
המון,
in a lot of
הצבא הפך להיות
technology,
מאוד
a
טכנולוגי,
lot. The
והקליטה
military has
הזאת
become
למעשה
very
הגדילה את הפער,
technological, and
כשהיחידות
this
המילואים לא
increased the
קיבלו
gap because the
קודם כל זה
reserve,
דורש מאוד
the
מאמץ
people
גדול,
in the reserve
לקלוט את היכולות
units,
הטכנולוגיות
it
האלה
requires
שלא
a
השקיעו
great
אותו במילואים,
effort
וזה
to
ידרוש
learn these
שוב פעם להגדיל
technological
את היקף המילואים,
capabilities, and that
ולכן גדל
requires
הפער הזה,
additional reserve service
והתוצאה היא
days, and that increased this gap.
שלמעשה
And the result
מפקדים,
is
מקבלי
that
החלטות,
commanders and decision makers
למעשה הפכו, ולמעשה מי שיודע בצבא, לפעמים קוראים ליחידות האלה יחידות חלולות.
sometimes
זאת
they
אומרת,
call these
המילואימניקים, אתה יודע מה,
units
אוקיי,
vain
הם
units. They say, you know, the
לא מספיק
reservists,
טכנולוגיים,
they are
אנחנו לא
not
הפעלנו אותם מספיק,
sufficiently tech
יחידות
savvy.
לא
We
מוכשרות
didn't teach them
ברמה כמו הסדיר,
enough about
ולכן
the technology.
אנחנו לא
They're
נפעיל
not
אותם.
sufficiently
ולאט
trained
לאט אנחנו רואים
like
שבפועל
the mandatory
לא
soldiers, so
מופעלות.
we are not
בעימותים
going to use them.
האחרונים,
And you
בסבבים
see that
האחרונים
in the
בעזה,
recent rounds,
לא
the
הופעלו
recent
יחידות המילואים
campaigns in
בצורה
Gaza, the
בצורה של
reservists
מסגרות
weren't
באופן
really
התקפי, אלא
used
היוו
for
בעיקר
assault
חליף סדיר. זאת
purposes.
אומרת,
They were
אוקיי, בוא נוסיף את
mainly
הסדירים מהקו,
alternatives for
נכניס את
the
המילואים ונשלח את
mandatory
הסדירים
soldiers.
למקום
They
הזה.
said, let's send the
ולכן,
mandatory
כשהיחידות
service
המילואים לא
soldiers
מופעלות
into Gaza,
במבצעים,
and the reservists will
יש
replace
שחיקה
them. So
מאוד
when the
גדולה אצל
reservists
המילואים.
don't participate
זה
in
חד משמעי, אנחנו
campaigns,
רואים את זה
it truly
בצורה ברורה, וזה
diminishes
למעשה,
their capabilities. We
זה
clearly
המעגל
see that,
שמוביל
and
את
this is
המשבר,
the
שככה אנחנו
vicious
קוראים, אנחנו
cycle
חושבים שזה
that's
משבר, ואם אנחנו
leading
נמשיך
this crisis.
בכיוון
We
הזה,
call it a
זה
crisis.
יחמיר.
If we're going to
המשבר של
continue in
שנות
this
ה-90, של
direction,
תחילת
it
שנות
will
ה-90,
even
היה
further be
בעיקר על
exacerbated. The
הוגנות.
crisis
זאת
in
אומרת,
the
על
1980s
בסיס
was mainly
ההוגנות,
about
הייתה
fairness.
מנהיגות
The
למילואים, היה
basis
פורום
of fairness, there
מג"דים,
was a
פורום
leadership
מח"טים,
to the
הטייסים,
reservists. We had
והייתה
the
מנהיגות.
forum of
המשבר הזה
pilots,
הוא
the
משבר
forum
שקט.
of battalion
שלא
commanders,
קורה
of
כלום,
brigade
פשוט לא
commanders.
קורה
But
כלום.
this is a quiet
וכשאנחנו
crisis.
נצטרך את
Nothing is
המילואימניק הזה,
happening,
לא
and
יהיה
when we'll
אצלנו,
need
ולכן צריך
that
להיזהר,
reservist, we
ופה
won't
אנחנו
have
מבקשים
him. So this
לשים
is
את
why we need to
נורת האזהרה.
be cautious, and this is
מה
why we
לדעתנו
are putting up
כדאי
this warning sign. What
לעשות?
needs to be done?
קודם כל,
Well, first of all,
ונאמר פה כמה דברים,
and
הדבר
this
הראשון
has
שאני
been
חושב
said
שהוא
here, the first
החיוני
thing
ביותר זה
that I
עניין
think is
הנחיצות.
most
זאת אומרת,
essential, that's
אם
necessity. That
איש המילואים,
is
זה
if
לא
the
התגמול הכספי,
reservist, it's
וזה לא,
not
זה
the
העניין שאיש המילואים צריך
monetary
להבין שצריך אותו.
compensation. The reservist
אם
needs
מישהו,
to
אם הלוחם
understand that they're
במילואים לא
needed
מבין
if the
ולא
combatant
חושב, והם
in
מספרים לו,
reserves doesn't
תהיו בטוחים
understand and
שמס
doesn't
השפתיים
think, and
אומרים כל
you
הזמן,
need to be certain that the
אנחנו
lip
שומעים
service,
בכנסים
we
מילואים,
keep
אומרים
hearing
דברים
this
יפים
in
על
conferences
המילואים,
for
אבל כשבאים
reservists,
להפעיל
they
אותם,
say beautiful
לא
things,
מופעלים.
but when
אז אם איש המילואים
you
מבין, והם
actually, if
מבינים,
you need them, they're not
זה
summoned.
כמו ילדים
And
קטנים, אתה
you
חושב
know,
שאתה מספר להם
it's
סיפורים,
like
והם מבינים
children.
הכל.
You think that you
ואנשי
can tell
המילואים
them
גם מבינים הכל.
stories and they'll
אם הם
believe you, but
מבינים
no, they understand
שלא יפעילו
everything. They
אותם,
see
אז
reality.
מה
And
אנחנו
if the
מצפים,
reservists think that they
מה
won't
מצפים
be
מהם
summoned, so they think,
בעניין הזה.
what's
עכשיו,
even,
זה
why is
למעשה
anybody
הנושא הראשון
expecting them to
נחיצות.
come? So
הוגנות כמובן,
that's
אנחנו
one
מדברים על
issue,
מענה הוגן,
necessity.
ואנחנו
Now
רוצים
there's fairness.
שיהיה
We
להם
want a
מענה
fair
הוגן,
response. We
שלם,
want them to
כולל
receive
הסביבה
a
התומכת,
fair,
כולל כל
comprehensive
המערכות,
response,
כולל
including a
התגמול הכספי
supportive
שכן,
environment,
בדין מגיע
including the
להם.
financial
וכמובן
compensation
הערכה,
that they
איך
do
אנחנו גורמים
deserve,
לציבור
and
הישראלי,
also appreciation.
לחברה הישראלית,
How can
להעריך
we
את אנשי
get the
המילואים
Israeli
בצורה
society to
שמגיעה להם.
appreciate, to value
עכשיו,
these
אנחנו חושבים
reservists
שהכלים
adequately? And
שבהם הם
now
צריכים
we
לעשות,
think
אנחנו
that the
ציינו
tools that they need to use. They've been mentioned, first of all, that the preparedness to improve their preparedness, there's no problem. The reserve duty law helped lift the burden,
העובדה שתקציב
and
המילואים
the
נמצא
fact
בתוך
that
הצבא
the reservist
היא
budget is
לפעמים
within
בעייתית,
the
כי זה הדבר הראשון
military, it's
שמקצצים.
sometimes problematic because this is the
אז
first
עלה
thing
רעיון,
that they
חבר
tend
הכנסת
to
יאיר
cut
גולן
back, and there was this idea, member
כמה
of
שנים,
Knesset
אמר
Amir
שבכלל תקציב
Yair
המילואים
Golan
צריך
brought it
להיות
up a few years ago. He
לחנות,
said
להיות
that the
צבוע
reservist
ולחנות
budget
מחוץ
should be
לצבא, שלא כל
earmarked
מפקד
and
יבוא
not
יגיד לו
be
בוא
part of
נחתוך
the
ובוא נחתוך,
military
אלא
budget so
לקבע
that
את זה.
the
אחת
commanders
האפשרויות.
won't cut
בכל מקרה
back on
העניין
it.
של
So
הכשירות
that's
הוא
one
עניין
option.
קריטי מאוד.
Anyhow,
מעמד
preparedness is
ואתוס חברתי, אני לא חושב
critical,
שצריך
and
להרחיב את
also
העניין.
the
שותפות
issue of
בביטחון
social
השוטף, יש
status
לזה
and
ערך,
partnership
אמרו את זה
in
כאן, כולם
routine
מבינים את זה, אבל
security
אין מה
has
לעשות.
a value.
תראו מה
Everybody's
קורה
mentioned
בשנה
that.
האחרונה,
Just
מאז
look at what has
שובר
happened
גלים.
this past year
כמה יחידות מופעלות, ומה זה
since
עושה
שובר
ליחידות, ומה זה
גלים,
עושה
how
לחיילים
many
וללוחמים, זה
units
פשוט,
have been summoned and what that does to
הגובה
the
שלהם עולה
combatants.
ב10
And
סנטימטר
the
של כולם.
soldiers, they
אז זה לא
all
עושים את זה
feel
בשביל
so
זה, כי
much
צריך,
prouder,
אבל
so
עובדה היא
they
שזה
don't
מה
do it to make them
שאנחנו חושבים
feel
שחובה
more
למצוא את
proud, but because
האיזון
they
הנכון
need it, and we
לשתף
believe that
בביטחון
you should
השוטף.
strike the right balance on
משימות
how
בחירום,
to include them,
כמובן
and
האש אופרטיבי,
also emergency times
וצריך
operations
לא רק
and
להגיד את
campaigns,
זה,
and it's
אלא
important not just
לעשות
to
את זה,
say this, but to
ובהזדמנויות
also
שצריך
say this,
להשתמש
and the
בכוחות המילואים האלה. אנחנו יודעים
opportunities
שיש להם ערך
necessary to
מאוד
use
רציני ומאוד טוב,
the
ואם הם
reserve
מאומנים הם יעשו את
forces.
העבודה
We
לא
know
פחות טוב
that if
מהסטיב.
they're well trained, they'll do
וכמובן
just as good
דיברנו
a
על
job as
התגמול
the
ופיצוי.
mandatory conscription
שורות
soldiers.
תחתונות,
Bottom lines,
לסכם את העניין.
to summarize this, let's see where we're at.
אוקיי.
Okay.
אז אני רוצה לציין אחד, שלצד מרכיב המענה למילואים יש תפקיד חברתי מאוד חשוב. תפקיד החברתי של המילואים הוא גם להוות גשר בין החברה הישראלית לבין הצבא כצבא העם. ואין להמעיט בחשיבות הזאת. אנשים ואתוס של המילואים הם שומרים על המרקם העדין של החברה, וזה חלק מהנכסים שיש לנו בחברה. אז נכון, אולי יגידו שזה לא צריך מבצעים, אבל צריך את זה לזה, אבל זה לא יקרה אם לא יהיה צד המבצעים. אני פה ציינתי פה, יושבת פה קרן, שהיא מפורום המילואימניקיות. יש פורום של המילואימניקיות, ויש עלייה מתמדת בהיקף הנשים שעושות מילואים, ואני חושב שהרחבת שירות הנשים מילואים נקודת אור חיונית במאמץ הכולל לשפר את מעמד המשרתים בחברה הישראלית. באחת השיחות איתה, אני תמיד עולה לי בראש, אנחנו הלכנו, כשעשינו מסעות ארוכים, שהלכה פקידה פקודתית איתנו, הלכנו יותר טוב. אז שהמילואימניקיות סוחבות, הבנים יסחבו יותר טוב. בסופו של דבר יש לנו אנשים מצוינים, יש לנו מג"דים, מ"פים, קצינים וחיילים, נכונים לכל אתגר. הם יעשו כל מה שטוב, הם בעצם כל מה שטוב בחברה הישראלית, והם יהיו נכונים לכל מאמץ, ולא שנחשוב שאם נקל עליהם אנחנו עוזרים להם. לא, נבקש מהם מה שצריך והם יעשו מה שצריך. תודה רבה. ועכשיו אני מבקש להזמין לבמה את יובל בזק, תת-אלוף יובל בזק, הוא סגן מפקד אוגדה בצפון, וגם חוקר, ואנחנו למעשה תאומים סיאמיים במחקרים שאנחנו עושים לאורך שנים, ואת חברי הפאנל שלו, עכשיו נביא את שלא נתראה בשמות, חברי הפאנל שלו אני מבקש להעלות לכאן את Ben-Ari, קצין מילואים ראשי, בבקשה בני.
reservist officer,
סגן אלוף
Benny,
מעיין
Lieutenant
פלדמן,
Colonel
מג"ד
Mayan
בחטיבת
Feldman, a battalion
אלכסנדרוני.
commander at the
יש פה הטיה
Alexandroni
גולנצ'יקית
Reserve
ברורה, אז
Brigade.
תסלחו לנו על העניין
There's a
הזה.
clear Golani
יש
bias
פה את
here,
רב
please
סרן אופר
excuse us
סיבוני,
for that.
השם לא במקרה, הוא מ"פ בחטיבת גולני, ותת אלוף אורי סינגר, מי שהיה קצין מילואים ראשי לשעבר.
And Brigadier General Ari Singer, former Chief Reserves Officer. Yuval. Hello, good evening.
בתחילת שנות ה-2000,
In the beginning of the millennium, Chief of General Mofaz summoned a series of discussions on the subject of civilian and military. Under the challenging title, the entire people are the army. We had psychologists, researchers, academics, officers in order to discuss the implications of the model of a popular army in reservists. Some people called the situation in the reserve forces back then a crisis. Others called it a challenge or a problem we need to find a solution for. 6 years later, in the Second Lebanon War, it was quite clear not only is there a crisis, what became evident is just how deep it is. There were the issues of the emergency storages, the increasing the preparedness of the reserve forces, and there was a small spike of returning to previous trends. But ever since, there hasn't been any genuine attempts to solve this crisis. crisis. In addition to that, the number of reserve services were cut back by 50%, the preparedness dwindled and was eroded, and the threat over Israel nearly increased. On the other hand, we have with us Major in Reserves, Ofer Siboni. Let's hear your applause, please.
Ofer הוא מפקד פלוגה בחטיבת
אלכסנדרוני. Ofer is a company commander at the Alexandroni Reserve Brigade.
נמצא איתנו סגן אלוף במילואים מעיין פלדמן, מפקד גדוד בחטיבת אלכסנדרוני.
מעיין פלדמן, a battalion commander at the Alexandroni Reserve Brigade.
תת אלוף במילואים ארי סינגר, קצין מילואים ראשי הקודם.
the previous chief reservist officer.
ותת אלוף Ben-Ari שמשמש קצין מילואים ראשי בימים אלה.
who is currently the chief reservist officer.
יחד איתם ננסה להבין את השינויים שהתחוללו במערך המילואים, את האתגרים בפניהם הוא ניצב, ולבסוף את כיווני הפעולה הנדרשים בכדי לשפר את מוכנותו למשימותיו במלחמה הבאה. ונתחיל עם הוותיק שבחבורה.
So let's start with the guy who's been around the longest.
ערב טוב, ארי.
Good evening, Ari. Good evening.
ב-40 השנים האחרונות שירתת כמעט בכל תפקיד
you
אפשרי
served
במערך
in
המילואים,
almost every
ממפקד
possible
פלוגה,
position
מג"ד,
in reserve forces,
מח"ט ועד
battalion
לקצין
commander,
מילואים
brigade
ראשי.
commander,
אפשר לומר
and
שיש לך
chief
איזשהו
reservist
ניסיון
officer. So
בעולם
one
המילואים.
could say that you do have some
אני רוצה להיעזר
experience in
בפרספקטיבה
this
הרחבה
field
שלך
of
כדי לנסות
reservists. I'd
ולהבין
like to
טוב
make
יותר
use
את
of your
תהליכי העומק
extensive perspective in
שעבר
order to
ועובר מערך
understand
המילואים.
the
בשנת 2008
deeply
נחקק
rooted
חוק שירות המילואים
processes that
שנועד
this
לקבוע
system
את
is
ההיקף
going through.
וכשירות
The
של מערך
law was
המילואים.
passed in
החוק
the
אמור היה
and
ליצור
this
נקודת
law was
איזון
supposed
חדשה
to strike a
בין
new
הנטל
balance
המוטל על איש
point
המילואים
between the
לבין
burden
התגמול
on the
וההוקרה שהוא
reservist
מקבל.
and the kind of
והנה עברו
compensation
15 שנים
and
ואנחנו נמצאים
appreciation
בכנס
the reservist
שכותרתו
receives. And here we
משבר
are
במערך
15
המילואים.
years later with
ננסה רגע
in a
להסביר איך
conference that
השפיע
its
חוק
title
שירות
is a
המילואים
crisis
על
in
המציאות שבה
the
מצוי
reserve
מערך המילואים.
forces.
האם מערך
I would
המילואים
like to
אכן
ask
מצוי
you,
במשבר?
is there indeed a crisis in the reserve forces? And if so, how is that crisis manifest? Hello and good evening. First of all, I would like to perhaps make your question a bit more accurate. The reserve duty law wasn't supposed to bring a balance between the compensation and the burden, but rather a balance between the ORBAT and preparedness. That's the beginning of this command, and then within this triangle to talk about what should happen, what needs to happen. When I started my reservist service in 1983, you could summon reservists to however time you needed for whatever you needed, and the law addressed these issues, how much is needed and what is it needed for. There's an annual preparedness meeting with the Chief of General Staff regarding the preparedness of the reservists, but with the political echelon, I only attended such a discussion once. I won't even tell you how many minutes it lasted, but it's less it was a very short amount of time. And that's the essence, because if we don't know, if we're not sure about the scope, the preparedness, or the reason, so then all the other things, of course, don't fall into place. As for the crisis, you've been sitting here for several hours now. I brought this image. These are three types of crises. The one on the left, it's the sword of Damocles, and on the right, sorry, for me it's to my left, but to the audience to the right. Somebody's sitting and relaxing, but there's this sword above him, and it's, hangs by such a thin thread, and it can take a second for the sword to fall, and he's completely unaware of it. The second image is the phoenix. Every several years, it gets burnt and rebuilt, so it exists, but it's completely irrelevant. I think that if perhaps I could compare it, and that's the beauty of the reserve forces, that it's anti-fragile in a certain sense, and that's the hydra, that you cut off the head and then a new head grows back. And it's a kind of crisis, and I prefer to turn this crisis into a harbinger, but also a woman, before she gives birth, He's in a crisis, and the question is, and that's the wisdom and the strength of the reserve forces. It constantly knows how to adapt itself and adjust, not like the phoenix, which is built and irrelevant. And the wisdom is to see what we regrow. Just like a woman who's about to give birth and needs to deliver something new for various reasons. We don't need to get into the reasons. Now that's what we need to do, and that's the smart thing to do. Thank you very much. Ofer, hi there.
Hi. You served over the last 9 years in the Electroni brigade. You have been a commander of a battalion. They said in the past, people used to say that the reservists used to meet often, we used to enjoy it, we used to train together, sweat together, and the cohesion was built through the sweat and tears, and we used to meet even socially. But they've been complaining, the reservists, that this cohesiveness has been deteriorating and it has been sort of as if fading away. What happens when you're talking about the fact that people just want to get out of it, the fact that they don't meet very often, so of course the cohesiveness is really dwindling. And they don't train together either. I think the best example was it during the year 2020, the COVID year. There was not even one reservist meeting with the soldiers. I mean, we're talking about, if I'm talking about all those years from 2014 that I would meet every single year. So in 2020, the whole year was a COVID year, so we didn't meet even once. And we reached 2021 for a training session in actual Tselim. And then 2022, our training was actually a kind of threshold examination period. And it was the first time as the commander of a company, and by the way, when you said the threshold train, it's a specific training that was done by the Northern Command for all the various actual companies, because they wanted to really examine its readiness in case of emergency. So, if we're talking about the actual dwindling and the detrimental effect on cohesiveness, how can this cohesiveness then improve if they continue meeting a few times? So we did also, not only did we serve on the line for a little bit, but we also did that specific threshold test. So, this love is created through sweat and tears, but also over time. So it doesn't matter even if you meet once every 3 years, that love remains. And you can see it time and time again. So, for example, in 2023, I also don't meet the soldiers. But if there is a crisis, I, in my opinion, believe that that is one of the problems. How can you create a framework that retains that cohesiveness if there is not military meeting? What happened now when you met, for example? What happened? Well, unfortunately, nearly entire companies simply did not turn up. And that is terrible. That is detrimental. Really, talking about how destructive that can be. We came and we'd worked really hard on this threshold test that we were going to do to see for readiness, and you can see the enormous difference. I mean, if you're talking about shirking out of the responsibility, they called it gray shirking of responsibility. It happens time and time again, and that is exactly what happened now when they were supposed to meet. Well, when we were serving on the line, they were all there together. So the result of that, when they, of course, is a detrimental effect on the cohesiveness. It's more important for me to say it's not only when you do not train that it goes down, but also if you do not meet. You're serving in the Alexandroni battalion as a commander of the battalion. You were in the Second Lebanese War. In a survey that we recently did, 67% of the commanders and 37% of the soldiers believe that they are not ready and they are not prepared enough in order to actually. Now, my question to you, and I know what is needed. Do you believe that you are truly prepared for war? Has the system supplied you with the optimum issues that you need, optimum equipment, training, etc., etc.? Or what would you personally improve so that you would be in your optimum condition for such a scenario? Well, I'll say a few things. First of all, you can see, if you're talking about preparedness and readiness for war, even if they haven't Alexandroni, even if they haven't trained, in their DNA they have Golani and they are ready. No, but that's just an example, and you qualified that here. And I've learned a lot about it from you. That I think that the equipment and the way you bring the equipment and relate to him already gives them that feeling even before they come and actually turn up for their reserve duty. So it doesn't matter if they, they're not even in, they haven't even been prioritized or whatever. But the moment they come and they feel from their commanders of the division that, hey, they're not compromising, and you feel, you spoke about that actual test, the actual threshold test, they found that only 2.5 actual companies were really ready for it. And you reach, the Northern Command. People actually, they found that they couldn't actually come because other of those companies had to be in other places and they weren't prioritized enough. So it's the moment you are equipped and ready, and that's the way they show you are prepared for it, then you really do feel it. But on the other hand, and the various other battalion commanders are sitting here with us, that ultimately I have to feel ready. And I want my soul, what will happen at that moment when you're ready to fight? You have to ensure that as few soldiers as possible are misoriented and ready. So I think that it's part of the DNA of our actual brigade. The feeling is, if perhaps we take our foot off the accelerator a little bit, then unfortunately you'll feel that deterioration in the whole level of everything. And you spoke about carte blanche, you spoke about various tenures and differentiality, and people have been mentioning that throughout. You have to ensure, and I'm supporting it, by the way, you have to ensure that this does not cancel that possibility of getting really top quality people. So the Singapore Army model that people are leaning on and speaking about, its criteria, by the way, they're actually coming here to train from us, to see us and how we're prepared. And by the way, if it is not working, then we're going to lose a lot of people. So they're coming actually next week to see how we are prepared. I think that I want a full training session. I'm talking about once a year, at least. I think that's much more important. I think that there ought to be a real drill under fire. Well, friendly fire we're talking about, of an entire battalion once a year. That's more important, but also many other things. And I think that the wave breaker, as we called it, did actually really promote things and change things, and we really learned a lesson from that. And I think that people have learned a lot. And it's promoted. For many years, you were in the army, you were in Cast Lead, you were actually a battalion commander, and then afterwards in other other campaigns, and during a certain period you were also the commander of reserve forces, and all sorts of things, really very significant change. There was a real, and a feeling was that perhaps we can get by without the reserves, and suddenly in Wavebreaker things changed very drastically, and they understood that it would not work without it. How does this impact the way of thinking in the IDF vis-a-vis its necessity, how needed it is, vis-a-vis the actual reserves orbit? I think at the moment we're in the middle still of that process. It hasn't ended yet. We're talking about so many employments that really and working on these things really, because we believe it's the most important component. And we have understood, and it's been said here, the feeling that you are needed, because this contributes to the security of the state of Israel, and this is what does it. I mean, Zionism may be a passé word, but anyone who really does serve in the reserves know that that is what brings them. That's the love of Israel and the desire to secure and defend their homes. And I think that when in the reserves, this is connected to the actual operational access, and that feeling really gives them that tailwind, where Ofer said that cohesiveness, said that in order, without that cohesiveness, no one will want to put their foot on the accelerator. So in other words, you need that operational activity, you need those drills, the fire. And undoubtedly, just as Mayan said, we're paying a price for all this. And we have to meet the needs, and we are prepared to do so. A reserve battalion that trains year after year, and we suddenly don't do it, then we understand that they're going to give them something else, so that they will be prepared in a state of war. And Gershon also spoke about that beforehand. We're not anymore in that place where it was Yom Kippur, and then all the entire reserve of the army has to turn up at the emergency storage units and immediately be deployed. So I think that ultimately, the fact that we have suddenly seen the soldiers just ahead of us, in front of us, and really drilling with them, exercising with them, changes everything. And I think it was 2021, we really were thinking about really different kinds, and we started doing individual training sessions, and that was first us. We hadn't done that before, and that really, the whole morale and the whole training and their sense of competence really changed thanks to that. So we've been doing a lot of that. The Wavebreaker actually did change the frequency of these trainings, so we need to change that as well. But as Ari described it, the way I see it at the moment is that yes, something has changed in a different way, and a brigade that leaves at that period of time on the borders, they are ready, they are prepared, they've got morale, and we certainly are in an embedded situation, an improved situation than we were in the previous years. Ari, the next question is for you. We were speaking about figures of 6%, 1.5%. Yaakov Amidror spoke about the model, that the basic ideas of the army emanated from it. They weren't just strategic needs, but this created an ethos for the Israeli population, for the whole country. I'd like to ask you, do we still have a people's army in the reserves? Do we still need that? Because it actually is only served by such a small fraction of our people. Do we really need that? Maybe we ought to have just one that is truly trained, remunerated, etc. So please give me your view on it. Now, first of all, what is a people's army? I mean, you can find all sorts of definitions for that, but anyone who looks at a quantitative one, that you'll have a specific percentage of the population, then you're not going to find it. Don't go there. But I think what I believe in is that the IDF plus the reserve is representative. For in the Orbat, all the parts of the Israeli population are represented there. Some more, some less. And now I think it's, I think with the Haredim and with the women, we're in a positive, it's a positive trend at the moment. So I think that you have to really forget that quantity model. I think that definition of a representative people's army, that's actually closer to it. It gives us a resilience in the state of Israel that I believe really that here, this is the only place. I mean, regular is different, but in the actual reserves, you can see the leftist, the periphery, center, right-wingers, and people do it with a sense of brethren, of brotherhood, and they're all serving together. It's very different. It's the only place that you really all meet together, all parts and types and characters of our people. I'd just like to actually quote what Gadi Eisenkot wrote in 2018, and I'll explain afterwards a little more and fine-tune it. He said that the reserves actually defines how they are actively serving the state of Israel, and that is one of the proofs that it is the people's army, and there is a potential to strengthen our national and military resilience because they are messengers from the people in the army, and they are actually representing and representing us, the people. Now, that was in 2018. I mean, after you hear words like that, you immediately want to put the beret on and salute. And I read that, and I spoke to the actual, the chief of staff, and I said, but in all what he wrote in 2018, it was as if it was something that it should be taken for granted, and it really strengthened Israeli society. But there's something missing here when we talk about reserve. Now, he spoke about an emissary. Now, what is to be an emissary? It's interesting because to be an emissary is one of the actual values of IDF. If you ask an officer in the standing army if he is an emissary, what he would say, no. I think if you ask who is, and if you ask someone from the regular or from the standing army or for the reserves, they would say perhaps someone from the government even. But I believe it's something very different. So after the peace agreement with Egypt, we reached that sort of stability of the Shlomo Galil, and then after that, unfortunately, there were various terror attacks and incidents and the instabilities. So I'd like to go back to that hydra that we spoke about beforehand. I think that we need to adapt ourselves, and that is the flexibility and the beauty of the flexibility of the reserve duty and those who serve in it. In the survey, the people who serve in the reserve said that they feel that they believe that Israeli society sees them as suckers, and they're not happy, they're not satisfied with the people, the way people, the government, the employers relate to them. Do you feel like a sucker? Do you and your soldiers feel that Israeli society actually appreciates your sacrifices? And what do you think should be the steps to improve this kind of feeling, this sentiment? I'm going to speak only on behalf of myself and not my soldiers. I don't feel like a sucker at all. I think if I really try to fine-tune and explain what the actual crisis is, and that is how we are looked at and how we are seen in the eyes of the people, of the others. I think that the reservist, when you're actually, when it's the most days that you're giving into the reserves is usually at the peak of your building of your career and your family. But I would like to say that yes, for me it's very problematic. It's usually, you know, if you do so much army, a reserve service, and I don't know if I can employ you. I don't know if you're really an employee that I want. Anyone who interviews you definitely thinks that, gosh, you're going to do 60 days a year. So the impact on your own professional actual promotion and progress at work and the building of your career could be truly detrimentally affected. So that's one issue. And it's very important to stress that. And it's not the feeling of being a sucker. That's not where it emanates from. But I think in our daily lives, it's very easy in a convention when you go into a conference and you can just press a button. But it doesn't work like that in our daily lives. And things are very difficult to organize and arrange it. How can it be done better? And I think we should focus on that. I don't think that in order to improve the feeling of or the way the society looks upon reservists could be done through remuneration. I think it has to be done through soft things. When you go to a new place of employment and the way they look at you, is there appreciation? You're going for a month, oh gosh, okay, go, we'll get by. But when you come back, boy, will I give you everything that you missed. So you'll have to do double the work. And that's the way it is for me. There are other places that it's not like that. For example, my second in command, for example, he works for a big high-tech company, and there it's fantastic. Go on, give me that example, please, a positive example. So he should speak on behalf of himself. They give him a little addition to his salary, and the actual CEO immediately comes, greets him back that, hey, you've really done something that we admire you for and we approve it. But when you don't have it, like with me, it really does have a tremendous detrimental effect on the way we feel and our whole sort of self-image. And it's how everyone around you relates to you. And it's something that has to permeate the entire public discourse. I think just now, the new chief of staff, when he spoke, and he said how he continued his army service, and the concept of the reserve should be part and parcel of that. And he spoke about that when he actually was given his when he took upon himself his new role as chief of the general staff. And he spoke how important it is, the reserves. You spoke about the burden that is falling upon a very narrow, a very small group. Those hours that you're not with your family, that you're not being employed, that you're not actually at your place of employment. It is an onus, it is a burden. What does that do to you? How much do you need to invest, and how many hours, please, be free completely? You're talking about you're the commander of a battalion, but just think for a moment, when you come and those reservists join you, you're talking about a minority that is paying a social unequal tax for this social inequality. how do you put across what would be a true remuneration from them? I'm not talking about financially. I'm talking about that as well, though. I'm talking about what could be given to them so that they would feel different about this burden. It's not fair when you're asking someone who is actually the commander of a battalion. I mean, we've done so much. And my wife was once asked, what is a family vocation? That is when an entire family mobilizes for one specific objective. And I think it's a beautiful answer. So the word burden is a bit too strong a word. So when you ask the commander of a battalion that, it's a bit, I think, off. But if you are talking about the reward, the remuneration, I, by the way, employ at least 3 reservists who are officers. Undoubtedly, they are detrimentally affected. I'm not even talk about, I mean, if you take that 1.5%, I mean, if you talk about that, you know, on the veterans, for example, in the queue on the subway in the States, they are actually given priority and they go ahead. It's sort of, and they go onto the subway if it's really packed. So if we could do something similar here, but things that could really change that situation, give them some kind of sort of, you know, what we call chupar, some kind of benefit, some kind of benefits. So even 0.03% of the population who actually serves to such a degree. And there's so many proposals, whether it should be the income tax, whether there should be some kind of graph so that some kind of grant so that they would, if they do this amount of days of reserve, then they shouldn't actually be paying, they should get a kind of sort of some kind of bonus or benefit, and that they should have allowances and tax returns. Or for example at Ben Gurion Airport, why do they have to undergo such sort of intensive security checkups? They should have some kind of bonuses and benefits. I mean, I think that my children, for example, how long it's going to happen for, and they're completely focused on the end of it, and that they can, but let's not go into all that because it's really tough. So if we're thinking about how to really give them that kind of bonus, I think we should connect to the lobbyists in the Knesset, and it's just periodical. It should be something that is really ongoing. There should be something that is truly be fixed in at the Knesset. It shouldn't be something that, you know, random from time to time and sort of staccato. It should be a real long-going, and every combatant in the reserves now depends on the actual maneuvers that he's got to participate in. He does a number of individual training, and that is totally uplifted and update and really promoted the whole level of their training and their preparedness at the moment of a crisis or war. And we've seen it since they've started doing these individual training, and they've started doing that. It's literally, we're talking about, really, it's multiplied by 50%, not 50%, I mean, the actual from the point of view of the standard and the level. And it has to be something that should be part, you know, from the point of view of the parliament, it should be part of the budget, and so that the employer and society will understand these issues. Yes, so then take this 1.5% that is awarded to people should be really multiplied and should be stressed that this is a very small group. Now, we want to
There's the issue between the fact that if we're trying to reduce the burden, it can be detrimental to the preparedness of the units. Can we break this vicious cycle? What does the reservist want in 2023? What does the reserve unit need in order to have it both ways, to both be prepared and cohesive, and also not to lead to some kind of an erosion and burnout among its combatants? So you're asking actually two questions, what they want or what they need. There's a question in the spirit, a question that has to do with logic. So we'll try and maybe answer this from a different direction, from a different angle. Is there a slide here? Okay, so. So finally we have someone here from the Armored Corps. You know, when we try to understand what are the crucial assets of the reserve forces. So first of all, we have trust. Today everything is, multidimensional in the military, so if I don't use that word, they'll think I'm not in the loop. So first of all, it's multidimensional. So the first thing is how, if the actual leader believes in himself, how can he believe in himself? He'll train. So here I connect between the desire and this came up earlier, the need to speak the truth with the soldier so that the soldier will believe in himself because he's professional. That's one thing. Another thing is the trust, the soldier's trust in his friends, the other combatants, the cohesion, the unit. And if they don't meet with each other, it simply won't happen. Some of these meetings are more formal and others are not. And the third element is trust in the commanders that they need to follow. The fourth is the military. When I was the battalion commander in my first discussion with my soldiers, whenever you ask why the military, that's me. When I became brigade commander, I said, whenever you say, why is the military stupid, you can think that I'm stupid. Okay, so the trust that the soldier has in the military and the trust the soldier has in the country, but that's less relevant for us. So that's trust by and large, to connect the trust, the desire, and the need. And another element is the sense of necessity. And here it's also manifest in an operational plan. Look, if you're constantly stressed, but you'll do something, if you're keep saying that it's necessary, but ultimately they don't do much, then they won't feel that they're necessary. So this is something I've known for years. What I learned that was new, this is in the following slide. This is the level of trust between regular mandatory service soldiers and the reservists. And by the way, one of the duties of the officer is to get the mandatory soldiers to believe that they can. And sometimes, you know, they meet the first time in these divisional trainings. And this is, you know, the uniqueness of the reserve service. What they do is long-term positions, and you build this gradually. And I think when you take all of this together, this can connect the desire with the need, and it provides an answer to how I connect the spirit to the profession. And one last question, that's for you, Benny, and later if we have some time we can open up for questions and look into the future. We discussed the challenges which the IDF reserve forces face, and also the realization that the threats threatening Israel require a very good reserved forces. So let's go back to the drawing table. What are the directions you intend to take in order to guarantee that reserve forces will once again be a solid support and a defensive measure for the Israeli society. Look, first of all, in order to make plans and to talk about them, you need to understand that there's another side to this equation, and that is the Israeli society and the reservists, that somehow along this streamline you are 1 month in the military and 11 months in society. So we also need to understand the processes that happened there. We're after COVID, we're after several years of political instability, budgets, all kinds of ramifications, all kinds of issues that have different implications when you sit down to think how to improve things. And in addition, there are the processes occurring within the military, that individual training, or for example, from uniform to university. I don't know if everybody understands the significance of this program. It means that almost all combatants who come to the ground forces today from the to reserve duty, they're students, so it's much more difficult today in comparison to the past. They're contending with significant challenges, and also we are fully there's 100% placement with young combatants. When I was a company commander or a battalion commander, the average age in my company was 35 years old. Today it's 28 or 30. This has tremendous implication. Ofer said this is exactly the stage in life that you're building yourself. So there are also implications here that impact these programs. So let's talk first about the IDF. In the IDF, we're constantly checking ourselves and looking at the model of the reserve duty or the People's Army, whatever you want to call it. Can we indeed fulfill all of our missions? And when the time comes, will we know how to operate this and make sure that it wins? And ultimately, this is the key question that needs to be asked when you're talking about reserve forces, and this has been mentioned earlier. The expectation alignment stage is critical. We need to be able to say to every battalion, every brigade, what its goals are, and that the models support its mission. This is the first stage in expectation alignment, and I'll tell you a short story about this. I was in the Roni Numa committee, and there they talked about the Judea and Samaria battalions. And other battalions, they said, let's cancel their special assistant forces, and they don't need tanks anymore, and they don't need to train with tanks. And I vehemently objected to this. I was certain that it will completely break the ethos and spirit of these battalions, because who's going to want to be a combatant or a battalion commander in such a battalion that doesn't fight in the first line? But then it turned out that they have the highest spirits and combat willingness. They do a great job in Judea and Samaria. They have equipment that's in line up their assignment. Their reserve model is also in line with their mission, and they feel completely aligned with their mission. So I think we need to also work in that direction in the ground forces as well as in other places in the military. In addition, we need to make sure that we constantly maintain this balance between preparedness in war and the training model, and to constantly understand that the gap between the conscript soldiers and reservists with respect to the platforms and means of warfare, this is something that's going to remain with us. We're talking about different tanks and the other night vision means or other sights or different personal weapons. It's going to affect us wherever you look, and we need to know how to deal with that. In the other hand of society, one of the main things that we have to do, and I need to really push for that, helping the country to cherish optimally those who do reserve duty, and so that anybody who does reserve duty will feel that the country sees them. And Ofir talked about the envelope. We
ההשלכות של משרת המילואים, לדעת שהוא בן אדם איכותי, שתורם למדינה, והמדינה מוקירה ומעריכה אותו. אנחנו צריכים, והקמנו צוותים שעוסקים בדיוק בנושאים האלה, אנחנו נמצאים בשלבים סופיים של גיבוש ההמלצות, ומחכים שהממשלה החדשה תוכל לקבל אותנו ולהתפנות אלינו, ובעצם ליישם את הדברים האלה. אני לא רוצה סתם לזרוק פה הבטחות או מספרים, אבל אנחנו מתכוונים לטפל באותו תגמול מזערי שדובר עליו כאן, שבעיניי הוא השכבה הראשונה שצריכה לתת מענה לאנשים שמאותגרים הכי הרבה, שזה משרתי המילואים הצעירים והסטודנטים. צריכים לדעת קודם כל לשפר את היכולת שלהם להתמודד עם תקופה של מילואים. לאחר מכן אנחנו נטפל גם במעסיקים. הזכיר פה מעיין כמה מהרעיונות שיש, ואנחנו מתכוונים להגיע לדבר הזה. אנחנו נדע לטפל במשפחות של משרת המילואים. גם פה יש לנו רעיונות ודברים שחלקם הם באחריות צה"ל, חלקם אנחנו צריכים את המדינה איתנו בעניין הזה. ורובד נוסף זה כל סיפור האוניברסיטאות שנהיה יותר ויותר דומיננטי במערך המילואים. אנחנו צריכים לדעת לאפשר למשרת מילואים שיהיה לו את הזכות לראות הקלטות של שיעורים, ראינו בקורונה שזה אפשרי, ולדעת שהאוניברסיטה לא נותנת לו מועד ג' בשנה הבאה, ואז זה דופק לו את הסמסטר או את הסמסטרים הבאים, ואלה דברים שאנחנו מוכנים איתם כבר ורוצים את הממשלה ואת המדינה איתנו כדי שהדברים האלה יקרו.
תודה רבה. יש לנו זמן לשאלה אחת בלבד, אז אם מישהו רוצה לשאול את הפאנל המכובד,
זה מה שקורה כשעושים כנס של גולנצ'יקים.
אז אוקיי, תודה רבה לכם, ואני מקווה שבאמת, בני, ברוח הדברים שלך, אנחנו נעשה עוד כמה צעדים לקדם את המילואים למקום הראוי לו. תודה רבה.
Okay.
בסדר? בבקשה, יובל. רגע, אל תלך. תלך, עכשיו אנחנו נראה שניים פה. מרגיש כמו פף קטן עם תלושי דלק. בבקשה. תודה לך. טוב, אני מתכבד עכשיו להזמין את אלוף סער צור, מפקד מערך הכימרון של צה"ל, שייתן לנו את הראייה של הפיקוד הבכיר קדימה לגבי המילואים. בבקשה.
ערב טוב לכולם.
Good evening, everyone.
אני רק רוצה לתקן את פרופסור סיבוני, אני קודם כל מפקד הגיס הצפוני. על ב' אתם תראו טאג של פיקוד צפון, על א' אני הולך עם טאג זרוע יבשה, אבל אני רוצה להגיד באמת בפתיחה של הדברים שלי שכל כנס שעוסק במילואים ומראה רגע זווית כזו או אחרת שמסתכלת על המערך הכי חיוני שלנו, אני חושב שזה כמובן מבורך.
element that we have, I believe, is an excellent thing. And just this morning, I saw what Professor Siboni wrote in the newspaper, and I think I truly agree with the bottom line that all of us ultimately want what's best for the reserve forces, to give them a sense of pride and dignity, and of course to compensate them decently. And you'll see in what I'm about to say that this is exactly what we intend to do. So just before I begin, let me tell you that I just finished 2 days in the Northern Command, and I can tell you that yesterday we had an operational discussion on how we
המלחמה הבאה או את המהלכים הבאים במלחמה, ואנחנו, אין בכלל שאלה כזאת, על השולחן, ועל השולחן ישבו כל מפקדי האוגדות של פיקוד הצפון, כל מטה פיקוד הצפון, 4 אלופים, 2 בסדיר ו2 במילואים, ובכלל השאלה לא עלתה, נהפוך הוא. אין לנו בכלל שאלה אם צריך מילואים או לא צריך מילואים, אנחנו בטוחים שצריך, ואנחנו אומרים לא רק שצריך, אי אפשר בלי המילואים, בוודאי לא במלחמה הבאה בלבנון, אז זה ככה החלק שלי שרציתי להוסיף. אני מניח שאני לא אחדש לכם הרבה, כי גם התעדכנתי במה שהיה פה קודם, וגם מההפסקה שמעתי את הדוברים, אבל אני חושב שאני כן אעיר כמה נקודות שחשוב להעיר, ושחשוב לי בתור נציג צה"ל רגע להגיד פה מהבמה הזו, ואני חושב ששוב, בתור גם מי שמחובר די הרבה שנים למילואים, אחרי ועדת רוני נומה ב-2013 ביקש ממני הרמטכ"ל ב-2017 גדי איזנקוט לעשות ועדת מילואים נוספת שתבדוק רגע קודם כל את תוצרי הוועדה של רוני נומה וגם תמליץ המלצות נוספות, זה היה ב-2017 בואכה 18, וצריך להגיד שאני לפני חצי שנה, כמעט שנה, עשינו follow-up נוסף לדבר הזה, וחלק מהדברים גם אתם תראו פה כנראה. אז נתחיל, אולי השם פה
And perhaps the name here isn't good enough. It's not what has changed since 1973, but if we push it a decade ahead, there are certain important elements that have changed in recent years. Some might say 30-20, but let's say in the past few decades.
First
of all, that's the nature of the enemy, the nature of war, and you know, just until a year ago, that's not me.
העולם אמר שנגמר עידן המלחמות הגדולות, ראינו שזה לא כך כמובן עכשיו מה שקורה ברוסיה ואוקראינה, אבל כולנו יודעים שממלחמת לבנון הראשונה בעצם אין מלחמות גדולות, לא אצלנו, זה לא אומר שלא תהיינה, זה אומר שבאמת אנחנו בעידן של מבצעים, עידן של אויב שהוא אויב מבוזר, בכלל צבא טרור ולא אויב מדינתי כזה או אחר, ובעצם גם הסיפור של משמעויות כיבוש השטח וכולי, זה כבר, זה לא משהו שנס לחוק כמובן, אבל אנחנו כבר מדברים בשפה נוספת של פגיעה באויב ושלילת יכולות, וכן, גם השטח, אבל לא בטוח שהוא היום במקום הראשון. הדבר השני, ואולי אני חושב שזה הדבר הראשון פה בשקף, זה הסיפור של ההשתנות של החברה הישראלית. ממאפייני הדור החדש, דור ה-Z, שפה עוד פעם, זה לא רק בצבא, כל מי שמעסיק פה חבר'ה צעירים, אז אתם מבינים שאתם לא קוראים לו לרעיון, הוא בעצם מראיין את המרואיין. אותו דבר קוראים בצבא, וזה פני הדור, הדור מצוין דרך אגב, אבל הדור רואה דברים אחרים. החברה משתנה, התא המשפחתי משתנה, תפיסת האיום, ואולי זה הדבר המשמעותי ביותר בסיפור הזה של החברה הישראלית ומה שקרה לנו בעשורים האחרונים, ללא עידן של מלחמות גדולות, אלא מבצעים יותר קטנים, זה באמת השתנות של תפיסת האיום. עכשיו תסתכלו רגע מה קורה באירופה גם באירוע הזה, שגם אירופה, ואני דיברתי עם לא מעט מפקדים, היינו לפני חודשים ספורים את כנס החדשנות, וראינו שם הרבה צבאות מאירופה, שפתאום רגע הולכים אחורה בצורה משמעותית, כי מבינים רגע את התפיסת איום שם, שקצת השתנתה להם בשנה האחרונה, אבל פה אם שואלים אזרחים, סך הכל, האזרחים חיים טוב במדינת ישראל, יש מבצעים מדי פעם, אבל התפקיד פה בסיפור הזה זה באמת לראות שאנחנו מרחיקים את המלחמה כמה שאפשר. יש פה גם עניין של גידול דמוגרפי, אפשר לראות פה שמבצעי המילואים, האוכלוסייה, 85 הכפילה את
service, the population has doubled itself. We have a demographic increase, but you'll see that relatively speaking, our numbers are pretty stable because we also don't think that in this context we need more. And one more thing that has happened here and has changed that, means of warfare and the budget and of course the cost of operation. We have the F-35 and the special Namer APCs, not the 2 or 3, and Merkava Mark 4, and these things are much more expensive. It's not just in reserve duty, also in regular army, and when we talk about it, the multipliers are pretty large. What hasn't changed, you can read this. This is a quote from the outgoing and incoming Chief of General Staff, and a necessary condition to achieve decisive victory over the enemy during war is the maneuver, and the realization of the maneuver compels having the reserve forces as part of the ground forces. Next slide, please. So some facts and figures. Maybe you've already addressed some of these here, some perhaps are new. And let's look at the top right corner where it says that almost 2/3 of those who serve today in the regular army are also then sent to the reserve forces. Now, when you talked about the 1% or 1.5%, that's true, but that's out of 9.5 million Israelis, and that includes women and children and Arabs and Haredi Jews, and so some of them aren't even conscripted, aren't supposed to be conscripted. So that's 1.5% out of all that. None of those who are eligible for military service. We have 133% staffing or manning in combat. There aren't any units that are less than that. Other units are even more than that, and we've reduced that. So we have almost 100% placement of combat support among reservists. 25% of the reservists are not in active reserve service. You can see the asterisk at the bottom. 20 reserve days a year. That's the definition of active reserve duty, and we're now reducing it to 15 days because there are issues here with rights and benefits and other elements, but we don't need the entire Orbat all the time. So that's also part of our message here, and we'll soon talk about the differentiality that was mentioned here earlier, as well as other matters. We don't like the fact that 18% of the reservists are pleased with compensation and recognition. It means that over 80% are not, and it's even worse than the most recent survey you've had. And I think definitely we need to gear ourselves towards that. And I think that 35% of the equipment, it also has to do with what was spoken here, discussed here. And of course, we're constantly improving this. The percentage of women amongst reservists, we have to say that 18%, that's not in line with the percentage of women who are in the regular mandatory service. Even in our operational battalions, in recent years, the number of women serving in these battalions has risen. I'm talking about officers, female officers, but there are also a lot of female combatants. And you can see here the average of active reserve service broken down into different positions, and it's no secret. And perhaps it does injustice to any specific company commander, but the battalion commanders are definitely carrying the main burden. And if you'll allow me to take Yes, 53 days a year for a battalion commander, that's a lot, right? And I would actually like to take what was brought up earlier in the panel. You talked about the burden, and I am going to use the same Hebrew root, but I'm going to change the letters, and instead of burden, it's our talents. And I think that our battalion commanders are definitely our talents. And in this past year or year and a half, we have experienced experienced a significant challenge of a relatively low attendance to exercises and training sessions. Some might say that it's because of an overload. Others perhaps would say that it's because of issues of cohesion and necessity. And I think that it's sometimes both. It depends on the unit, and I'll also like to elaborate on that issue soon. So what challenges do we see? And let's move on to the next slide, and this probably won't surprise you as well. Let's move on to the next slide.
In order to prepare preparedness, readiness, and I'm talking about, of course, the ground forces. If we're talking about the Navy and the Air Force, it's much simpler because we're talking about much smaller numbers. But to prepare that kind of competence and capability and preparedness for thousands of reservists is much more complex. And I'll explain how we meet those needs. There's also a problem with the actual stability of the graph. Now we're talking about, when we speak about the wave breaker, then that hermetic sealing of the seam line in Judea and Samaria, a lot of those units and the reserve units are there, and they have to go back there, and they're going back there now. So our graph, as we said, over the last 3 years, we're talking about 14 days in their regular times, 14 days immediately in the reserves, and immediately the reserve actually graph really comes completely disrupted. Someone who's supposed to go there during the reserve, someone who's supposed to go there during the regular, things got mixed up. So you can understand that the stability of this graph is dependent on, of course, the challenges that the State of Israel faces. We know that there's a big gap between the regular conscripted army and the actual reserves. And I can tell you that someone who employs many reservists, people that do serve in the reserves, their claim is that whenever they come to the reserves, oh gosh, every time we come, there's something new. So wait, stop for a moment. We've got to live sort of between these two worlds. The technological gap between the regular and the reserve army has expanded this gap. And again, we're trying to meet these needs and align things, but in order to do that, it'll take a truly long time, many years, in order to truly reach a situation of equalizing it and align it all. Now, if we're going to talk about the actual training of the commanders, we have excellent commanders. There are no gaps between the different commanders. Very few sort of heads of companies, but that's of platoons. But that's minimum. But that still is a challenge that we need to face. We've got to bring the crème de la crème, and those who are really the most suitable to be our commanders and our officers. And there are additional issues that they're, of course, involved in. And it is a challenge, yes, a very significant one. And now the remuneration and the recognition and the signs of being cherished are definitely an issue, and with the various ministries and other officers that are involved in all that. And we have to really deal with that serious. And from the issue of actually, not that they're shirking their responsibility and not turning up, but that's also an issue whether they do come or not, and I'll tell you what we're doing vis-a-vis that issue as well. We've got 5 principles that we need to deal with when we're talking about meeting those needs. So I spoke about the challenges in the previous slide. Well, the first is that there's actually a moral obligation and the operational crucial obligation as well to train all our reservists. And I will actually immediately skip to 03, which means that we're doing a differential kind of preparedness training. In other words, those specific units that are actually fighting on the front line will, of course, be trained more than those on the home front, or on the actual borders. I would love to take all of them and train them to the same degree with the same warfare and the same Orbat and the same number of reserves, but there's a budgetary limitation as well, so we can't do that. So I'd like to go back now to number 02, and that is the retention of the size of the actual Orbat and so that it is really can meet the needs of a multi-arena scenario and to retain its stability. I mean, over the last years, unfortunately, it's become smaller and it's diminished, and we have to look north, south, Iran, so we have to be able to meet the needs to all our borders. Which is definitely the insurance policy for the whole state of Israel. We're talking about three annual, 3 times a year, stable training schedule. Sometimes things are moved slightly, but we have to see that it has remained stable for 3 years. We keep saying that this is a model for 3 years, but we've actually worked on that with this model for a few years now, and it's actually been stable and good. And another issue that we really do to invest in is the recognition and the remuneration. So when we say recognition, of course, we're also talking about the sense of being cherished and appreciated by the people. Now, I'm going to talk about the triangle. So you're talking about multiple arena, front line, and defense. Those are there are steps that we're taking, which is called actually ground stability. So we've literally analyzed each brigade, separated it differentially, exactly who needs what, when they need what training, what equipment, everything. The moment you explain to the commanders, to the officers, and to the soldiers what their specific mission is, and they see that they do have sufficient, adapted, appropriate warfare so that they can actually train and actually meet the threats that they are being trained for, the reference threat or whatever they're actually specifically training for, then you can see that they're so much more satisfied. Now, if we're talking about this every 3 years sort of plan, 3-year training plan. You can see on the right-hand side, you can see the various commands, and you can actually see the brigade, you can see the armored forces, the infantry, and assault on foot, or in other ways. But from the wave breaker, there are reservists who less than a year ago, they were doing operational training. Not training, but actually filling out their reserve duty literally already in their roles, and that was in sacrificing the training. But yes, we spoke about the sacrifice of the cohesiveness and everything, but we need that. We understand that is a model that we need, that they do have. There could be 2 or 3 training sessions of 2 or 3 days per annum, and something a bit more expansive once every 2 years or whatever it was. But we have, and then the operational training as well. We have to take all this into account and add it to our annual plan and our 3-year plan. So I've been told that I've only got 3 minutes left, so I'll really run with this. So if we're talking about the preparedness, you could see a full training graph like I showed you beforehand, but I neutralized the issue of the wave breaker because the balance, I'm sure, will come back during the second half of 2023. So I'd like to show you the differential training instead, and differential Orbat here. So we're now taking out of our storage the training that we had beforehand plan, which means that perhaps that we will try and make this Congress to this differential training. That was, in other words, we have to really exhaust the potential of every moment that they needed for trying, and the people who were responsible for that on a Sunday, on 12:30 every Sunday, we find a specific time for training, and we waste as little time as possible. We do a great deal more on simulators for the regular army and also the reserves, and this really does empower their training capabilities. And we have adapted the training of the commanders. We give them beautiful envelope padding sort of around them. The new app that has actually been uploaded, we accompany the commanders when they start their new roles. If we're talking, especially if we're talking about the battalion commanders, we're talking about scholarships that we award them and all sorts of development tools that they'll be able to develop themselves. And then I will touch upon the issue of recognition. I think that the reservist and the reservist family, the reservist employer, all these have to be touched upon, and I think they all deserve it too. So I think I'll say that at the end as well. Another slide, please. What we did not do in the past, and we're doing now, is we're investing in the motivation for service and how can we upgrade it and really promote it. We're talking about all sorts of cohesion, legacy, and various programs and things, and all this so that not only will they serve with that kind of frame of mind and come, but also that they will turn up for their reserve service. So we're doing that as well. I haven't seen the Namers coming to the reserves, turning up actually for the reserves yet. But a lot of it we have tried to do sort of various kind of conversion trainings so that we adapt the people. So, for example, the Namer people, we will actually send them to a specific other unit where it's more suitable, and perhaps they will want to come more to this. And this was in May 2022. This was decided. Wrong link, can't find it. Could you just, if you could just beside May 2022, if you could just click on it. These are the last decisions that were made. And as we said, there is so much more in the pipeline that is awaiting. But even the definition changes are very important. We had a whole Ubat day recently, and that was very, very important, by the way. Government, authorities, schools, all participated. And if we're looking at the various May 22 government resolutions, I think if we're talking about indemnification of the actual compensation that is given, and we've actually upgraded the value of the money that they're given for at least the minimal fee that they're given for one day, etc. We've changed all that. And yes, all sorts of benefits that were given, by the way, special races and running training in all the local authorities, and we're going to back that. So some is even with the wives and with the spouses, and there are all sorts of things in the pipeline, and Benny spoke about them. So we have all sorts of plans and programs that we're hoping to actually implement. And as I said before, we are committed to train, develop, retain, and really improve the training of our reservists. And we know how it is, truly of paramount importance. And we're not only talking about it, but we are doing it too. And the topic of this conference was the crisis of the reservists. and reserve duty. So yes, it's a challenge, and I think that we're all ready for this challenge. Yes, we do need to invest a lot into it, a lot of work, a lot of thought, and a lot of people, and there's still a great deal to do ahead of us. So we're improving the quality and the quantity of the training, because that will really improve that sense of capability and preparedness. I've just come back after going up to the Northern Command. We have building infrastructure for training there, which are pretty amazing in the Golan Heights and in other places, not only for the regulars, but for the reservists as well. We spoke about quantities and the soft components as well. And there are even those whose talk can tell us, wait, hold back a little bit. But this differential issue is very important. And I think that our message that I would like you to take home with you is that we'll continue initiating within the army and with the government all these changes that we believe are necessary. It's incumbent upon us to take these upon ourselves, especially for the server, the person who is actually serving, for the employers, the family. We have to really show, and we have to give as much as possible so that the families and the actual places of work will understand that. And I know that we need, it does not suffice. We need to give more, but we want to show that we really do trust our reserve bat, and it is so crucial, and together we will continue protecting the state of Israel and defending it. This is the very end, so we're going to ask Professor Efraim Inbar, the president of the JISS, just to wrap up for us. Good evening. A lot was spoken about risk management, and the JISS is very conservative. Our glasses are definitely not rose-colored lenses. So when we talk about risk management, I fear that assumptions that are underlying this risk management are a little bit too rosy. One has to look very carefully at these assumptions that are underlying the risk management, whether they are realistic or not. I also think that the IDF and various sociologists and political scientists, I think they are underestimating the capability of the State of Israel and the IDF to carry out its campaigns and its missions, its readiness to answer demands of its leadership, and undoubtedly the IDF is one of the important institutions that can make these demands. And I truly believe, and it was said, we have a wondrous youth, wonderful children. So we can go back to that period wherein you demand of the population to fulfill their commitments and their obligation in this modern world. Citizenship was always connected to military service. So thank you very much, and I sincerely hope I'm going to see you at many other events of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security.